Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Jenny Aiello, and this is With Love, Jenny, a podcast where we meet ourselves right in the heart of our vulnerability and authenticity. In this sacred space where it's just you and I dive into real life, rich with wisdom and opportunities for deep healing. I explore what it means to truly connect to ourselves, to each other, and to something much greater than us all. In each podcast, I like to meet life right where it touches us most, in our tenderness, in our truth, in our struggles and our strength. So wherever you are on your journey, or whatever it is that you're carrying, no matter how light or heavy, just know I'm so grateful that you're here with me today. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin today's episode. Hey there, it's Jenny. I'm here today with my co-host, Kristen, and we are going to talk about perspective and how it can influence our reality, especially when we make stuff up about what we think we see. So let's dive in. Kristen, are you ready?
Yes, let's do this one.
Well, I have to admit that this story is a bit mortifying for me to share. I still cringe when I tell it, and it happened almost 35 years ago. But I'm going to share it because it was one of the many lessons my children taught me. And I'm sure that as a young mother, I had had this experience many times prior. I don't think I was aware, as I wasn't given the experience to be aware of how much sometimes we think we're right about something without taking the time to really look at it from all the different angles. So I'm going to just share this story that I would like to say after 3.5 decades is hysterical, but I still, as a mom, feel how I felt that day. So this is what happened. I was probably about 25 years old. My son, Ben, I was older than that. My son, Ben, was about 3 years old. That's what's important. And he and his sister were in preschool at the time, and we had a very specific routine. I took them to preschool, and then after lunch, I would pick them up, and they would come home, and I would let them have a snack, and then we all had a quiet time for naps for the next couple of hours, and that was just our routine. Well, on that particular day, I had made a batch of our favorite Mississippi mud brownies. They had baked, cooled, and were cut into nice little squares stacked on a plate. So when it was time to go pick up the kids, I knew that they were going to want to have that for their snack. So sure enough, the minute we all walked in the door, the house reeked of chocolate and sweet goodness. And they knew something good was cooking in the kitchen, right? Ben beelined it into the kitchen and he found the brownies. And I said, yes, you and your sister could each have one brownie each, and that they needed to go sit at the table and eat it so I didn't have to vacuum up chocolate crumbs. So, his little nose barely made it to the countertop, and he's just looking up at that plate, and he reaches up with his kind of chubby hands and he gets the biggest brownie he could find. I went about cleaning out their lunch boxes and doing mom things while they were in there enjoying their brownies. And when I came back, there was Ben in the kitchen holding 2 brownies, one in each hand, licking the side of his fingers with a huge bite still stuffed in his little cheek. And I thought, bummer, So I said, Ben, how many brownies did I say that you could have? And he said, you said I could have one. And I said, well, how many brownies do you have in your hands? And he looked down and he said, 2. And then he tried to say something else and that began with, but, which would be an excuse for why he took 2 brownies. And I stopped him and I said, you can go ahead and eat both of them right now, but you will not be getting one tonight after dinner. He wasn't at all happy about that, but he did go back to enjoying every little bite of his Mississippi mud brownies. Well, that night came, and after dinner, I brought in the plate of brownies, and I set them on the table and told Ben if he wanted, he could go outside and play since he wasn't going to get to have another brownie tonight. Instead, he sat watching as we all ate our dessert and then began asking, questions he was quite concerned about. Mom, will there be any left by tomorrow? Would I get more than one tonight if I didn't have to have two at lunch? When will you make more of these? He was really worried that he wasn't ever going to taste a Mississippi mud brownie ever again. Well, finally, in an effort to try to help him feel better, my husband, who was agonizing over me holding this boundary, decided to help Ben learn how important it was that he did follow rules. So he asked him, Ben, why don't you tell me what you learned about what happened today? And after a few moments of thought, Ben said, well, I learned that when you only get to get one brownie, you should never, ever, ever break it in half. Oh my gosh. My jaw dropped. And you could hear a pin drop for about 10 seconds while we all tried to collect ourselves. And Bob and I looked at each other in horror. I was consumed with guilt, and ever so quietly, I just pushed the entire plate of brownies over to Ben and said, have as many as you want. This was my feeble effort to relieve the humiliation and guilt I felt for not understanding that situation better. And when I regained my composure, I said, Ben, why didn't you explain that to me, earlier today? And he said, I tried, but you wouldn't listen. The joys of parenthood. That was one of many, many, many mistakes that I made as a young mom. Even now today as an old mom, but it taught me so much about perspective. And I thought a lot about it since then. Sometimes, even though we see something with our very own eyes, it is still not the whole truth. It still isn't what it seems. So one of the tools we talk about in my coaching practice is that of learning to be nuanced and not rigid. When we are rigid in our outlook, we're being right about something, we dig our heels in when sometimes we don't have all the data to dig in about. So we have to be willing to walk around the issue, explore all the possibilities of why something appears the way it appears, and then try not to jump to false conclusions. What's worse is that once we come up with our false conclusion, we often then act on it. And that's what I did. Thank goodness Bob decided to explore what happened and the truth came out, and I could apologize and make amends with unlimited amount of brownies. But in my coaching program, it's called MSU, Making Stuff Up. I made up that he broke the rule. I made up that he couldn't help himself. He couldn't control or regulate his impulses to get two brownies and not just one when I wasn't looking. I can't tell you how often we can go into drama about something that didn't even happen. Although Ben would say that this experience as a 3-year-old was devastating, wasn't devastating. I don't know what he'd say. But as adults, the consequences actually can be much bigger than missing out on dessert. These misunderstandings or misperceptions turn into broken relationships. And miscommunications about it turn into stress and aggravation. And being right about what we think happened or what we assume was said or something that is literally for real right in front of you, it all has potential to tell a different story than what you have made up. And until you've looked at it from another point of view, stand in the other person's shoes and look at it from that perspective, you can't know for sure that your perspective is accurately representing the whole truth. So be willing to stop making stuff up and acting on it as if it's true, and you will start to experience less strain in your relationships. And you won't have to deal with all the guilt for 3.5 decades and counting. So until you understand this very big truth, feelings are also not facts. You will turn how you feel into a factual truth when in reality it might be way off course. So remember that too. If someone made you feel something, I feel like you don't like me, that is a feeling. It is not a fact. And until you go explore what's going on with the other person that's making you think they don't like you, you don't really know the whole picture. Kristen, have you ever been in a situation like that?
Yeah. A lot. I let my feelings take over my perceptions all the time. Just recently, I thought someone didn't like me immediately. I just had that in my head. And I finally had the guts to say something, and it wasn't true. I just made up this whole story around the situation and felt horrible about it. And then I do that in my relationship with my husband too. I have a reaction to something and I immediately get very upset. But the times that I take a moment to explore what's really going on and ask more questions, I had absolutely no reason to be upset.
Right.
I was using the story for my own validation that, oh yeah, that was making me feel crappy. But really it wasn't true. So I do it all the time and it frustrates me.
Well, and we do it to others, but we also experience others doing that to us.
True.
Have you ever been so misunderstood? And then the more you try to explain yourself, the more you look guilty because you're defending yourself against someone believing that they are right about a situation. And it can be really, really complicated. And it literally can end a friendship or strain a marriage. These things go deep. They really go deep sometimes. And so we have to be willing to be nuanced and not, I find myself, the big way I get present to something going on is when I find myself being in that black and white, rigid, I'm right and you're wrong. I'm right about what I see. You're wrong about what you see. And if we do that, that's what creates polarity. And we've seen that so much in our country lately, and in our relationships. We've watched that, chip away at the trust we have with each other. And it's an adaptive behavior when we adopt a place like you really want to be right about something. And the ego mind does do that. It will collect evidence about a belief that exists. So if I believe you don't like me, I'll collect evidence to prove that that's true, right? That's what the ego mind is doing. So we have to go into that as a deeper exploration about what is this attached to? What belief am I carrying so strongly that I need to be right about this? So it's an invitation, one, to do some self-reflection and personal growth, but just on the surface, look at how can I not let this impact my relationship, my friendship, my marriage, my child's well-being. How can I let this not, impact it in a negative way by being a bit more nuanced? And it goes back to the point of how little we listen to another person's point of view. Sometimes when we're listening, if we don't agree, we can still listen without that. Them being heard does not imply alignment or agreement, but understanding where they're coming from. I understand that.
It's also how little we listen to ourselves, because there's so many times right before I react, I hear a little voice in my head, don't do that. Don't say that. But I do it anyways because it feels like a high I'm going to get. But if you can listen, you know what I mean? If you can just stop and listen to those little nudges of something trying to say, don't go there. There is an overall, someone trying to protect you. I don't know if I'm wording this correctly, but your inner knowing is trying to support you, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. If we can listen to it. But I want to go back to what you said about you want the high. And that is our ego, and wanting to be right, wanting to win, wanting to get validated that your point of view is right. And we like catching people in a way that says, see, I'm right and you're wrong. And that's a one-up, what we call a one-up attitude that feels empowering, but it's a false empowerment, because really, is it that big of a deal to be right? You know, there's a very big truth that is said in our world of doing this work is, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Right.
It's not like you can have both all the time. And if you do get to be right all the time, it's probably because the other person acquiesces to you and doesn't express their truth. And that is a imbalance in the relationship, and it's going to show up eventually to be a problem. But let's talk about that. Can you tell us more about what that high feels like for you when you get engaged in an argument or something that you're going to be right about? By golly, I'm going to be right and I'm going to make you see that I'm right.
Coming from someone that's had a hard time having a voice and now using it, it feels very powerful. It feels very validating, and that you can walk away as you were the bigger person, even though you weren't. I mean, it never ends well. Never when I go the route of trying to be right. Never. And it's really, really hard to humble yourself and figure out what's really going on in the situation, where it could be both parties are at fault. It doesn't matter. How do you move forward without just one perspective being the right perspective?
I think it's allowing both perspectives to have their voice. And that's really powerful. What you said, Kristen, is that for someone who hasn't had a voice or used her voice, it feels very powerful now. And a lot of times that happens when we aren't used to being able to speak our truth or experience our opinions as something that people valued. We then feel like we get to use the anger about that, like the suppression opens, and the force field that pushes it out of our mouth is anger. And so it's a place where it can feel really good, and yet it's so destructive. You're right, it never ends well. But if you're in an argument with someone, and sometimes this happens to me, where I will see something, I will watch Bob put something away in the cabinet in the wrong spot. And I'll say, hey, you put the bowl in the wrong place. It goes over in this cabinet. And he'll say, no, I didn't. This is a crazy little example, but he could go, well, no, I didn't. You know, where we get in those, like, did you just do that? No. Did you just have 2 brownies? No. It's these little moments, and we see, our eyes witness something, and we don't feel like the truth is being told. And for me, that's my trigger. When I said, what is this anchoring? What is your reaction anchored to? And for me, I needed to be right about what I saw and tell the truth about what I saw. And that for me, the truth of what I saw was my son holding 2 brownies. No one's going to argue with the fact that he had a brownie in each hand. That was truth, right? And so it really hits something for me, who really I value truth, right? And so if it's not true, I'm now reacting to the fact that we're not arguing over a bowl in the cabinet or how many brownies are in the hand. We're arguing over, you aren't telling me the truth. I can't trust you. That's what I make up. I can't trust you right now because you're not telling the truth. And that impacts our relationship. And that matters to me. So I get passionate and focused and righteous and relentless about hammering until you admit that you weren't telling the truth.
Well, another layer too is, from an experience that I had, is when I'm having a conversation with somebody and they're taking someone else's perception over my perception, and like they're choosing, it feels horrible. If no one's right, how do you find the middle ground in that situation?
Right. And to me, it's going into what is true with a capital T, and communicating from that place. Now, when I say capital T, I mean the capital T is the truth was that Ben had one brownie, he broke it into two parts, and now he has two brownies. And I'm using this specific example because it's fundamental, right? Like if somebody's saying, no, he doesn't have two brownies in his hand. If Bob had been there in the moment, he could say, no, he doesn't have two. He's, and you're like, why are you taking his side when the truth is right in front of us? He's got two brownies. So we get caught up in power play, so to speak, where you're not seeing my point of view. But what I do is look and say, am I looking at your point of view? And until I'm willing to soften my rigidity, my righteousness about this situation, until I can back out of being relentless about it. And I mean, literally, sometimes I think I am going crazy. Sometimes I think we've lost a grip on reality here. And that's another truth that I will tell myself about it. So when someone is disputing what is so, stop and say, here's what I'm experiencing. What I'm experiencing right now is this. This is what I see. Help me understand what you see. What is your point of view looking at? And let them then listen. And then they will soften if people follow your lead, right? And if they don't, then say, what I see is that you're really adamant about your point of view, and it's hard for me to really understand it if I can't ask questions without you being relentless about being right. And so sometimes a timeout is necessary if it escalates, but a lot of times I'll just say, here's what I saw. Help me understand the higher truth here. Help me understand what you see from your angle. I have a little side story that I can tell you, another funny story about this that happened not very many years ago. My adult son, another one, Peter, was sitting in the living room, and he was sitting like at 9:00 in our living room, if you want to get the position. He's sitting there, and I'm sitting basically at 6:00. So I'm at his over to his right. And he had a paper towel, and he finished using it, and he threw it on the coffee table in front of him. And my kids are really good at reading me, and he was reading my face. Apparently, I made an interesting face that he made up was anger, and said, oh my gosh, Mom, chill out. I'll throw it away in just a minute. Right? Like he thought I was mad because he threw his paper towel on the table. And I said, wait, what? What? And he's like, you're all pissed off because I threw my paper towel on the table. I'll throw it away in a minute. So that was an example of him making something up about what he saw my face communicate. So what I said was, Peter, I'm not mad about that. I'm perplexed because what you just did was toss this paper towel on the table. But from my angle, it looks like this beautiful origami dove. And he's thinks I'm nuts at this point. Like, what? And I'm like, it looks like a perfectly folded dove, a white dove. And he was just like, no, it's a wadded up paper towel. And I said, from here, it looks like a dove. So I took a picture. I texted it to him. He opens his phone, and we're sitting 4 feet apart. He opens his phone, and he's like, oh my gosh, it looks like a dove. Now, from his perspective, it looked like a wadded up paper towel. From mine, it looked like a dove. We are both right. And if you can get to the place in your argument where you're both right, you have come to the highest truth.
That's huge. That was like a big aha for me right now.
So how do you get there is listening, letting someone share their perspective.
Another thought that I had is if you are somebody that grew up in trauma, you grew up in survival mode, and you're always looking for the other shoe to drop. You're always preparing for the worst case scenario. That is your perception always. So how do you go forward? I don't even know what I'm really trying to ask, but like, I personally, that is me. I that's how I function, and I'm learning not to function that way. And my husband grew up in a very I say leave it to beaver type home. So our perceptions are very different about situations for choices for our kids. In middle school, do I let my 12-year-old walk to get ice cream after school? And I'm like, heck no, I'm not letting him walk down a street without a parent. And he's like, give him that autonomy. Let him have those choices. Let's see how he does. It's very different perception.
Yes, very different perspectives. And those early childhood experiences actually form your worldview. And we talked about this a little bit in our last episode when we talked about the power of gratitude and changing from fear-based doom and gloom out thoughts to embracing more uplifting and positive thoughts through gratitude. So the work for you, and it's very hard when it goes into your DNA like that. That was early childhood development, and it's in your nervous system. And so your anxiety is going to get triggered because your thoughts are going to go to what is going to go wrong instead of what if we find that higher truth. The world isn't what it used to be when he was growing up. The world is full of evidence, that things can happen. And at the same time, do I want to live from fear, or do I want to live in a well-informed and well thought out life that gives the freedom and room for good possibilities as well? So saying, from my perspective, and I like to name things. So in that argument, you could say, in my perspective, it feels like something really bad could happen because that's what my worldview has been formed. It's like my worldview from my perspective is all the things that could go wrong. And he might say, well, from mine, here's all the things that could go right. So we both can be right. But then I would, if I were in his shoes, I would say, Kristen, which one do you want to come true? Which one do you want to be true? And keeping him, sheltered can also be a negative outcome.
Right. And I do see that.
Yeah. And so it's then saying what you need. Like, okay, this is going to challenge me to let him get ice cream after school. And maybe I need to park my car and just know I'm right around the corner so that I can see evidence that how happy he was and how fun it was and how that level of independence, really made him feel wonderful and good. And okay, we got to be right that something good came from this, but it's taking care of yourself in the process because you're up against your own nervous system about that early childhood conditioning, right? So how do I take care of myself while I allow a better outcome than the one I'm predicting to take place?
Right. There's so many things happening at one time.
Yes, there are. It's so amazing when we stop and dissect moments at how deep they go. We think that it's just on the surface, an argument about, a parenting decision, but it goes so deep into why do I need to be right about this? And this is me operating from my worldview or my foundation that was rooted in fear versus shifting that into we live in a wonderful community. And while we don't know what's going to happen, and that's the sad state of our world, but I kind of think it's always been that way. I do think that we've lost a lot of the innocence that we had when I was growing up, certainly. But I don't think that we want to support a fear-based reality. I don't think that our highest self is looking to support fear-based realities. I think our highest self wants to live in a place of well-informed and wise choices, calling on wisdom, not fear, calling on trust, not distrust, calling on love, not hate or judgment. It's like there's a lot of things that come into play in these little moments especially with parenting. I mean, our kids come and teach us so much. I'm still learning from things that happened, to my kids when they were little. And I think about that young mom doing the best she could and the navigating things that I didn't see coming, and we will share, and I have shared some of that already on this podcast. But I just think about me in my 20s and how I wish I knew. I wish that we had the wisdom that we gain through those experiences when we're having them. But that's what they're here to do, is to give us that and to help us learn. And your kids are great teachers of how to help us find our own path of healing and not imposing our experiences onto them or our worldview onto them, but allowing them to develop and glean from the wisdom. And that's the point kind of this podcast. How do we take these lessons and glean from it and take the wisdom of it and become better?
I think you're kind of touching on something too, of also how do we not pass on unhealthy perspectives, which gets really deep if you think about it, because it's ancestral perspectives that have been passed on. And then at some point, someone wakes up and says, oh, I don't like this anymore, but I don't know how to change it either.
Right. Ancestral and generational pain and shame are rampant amongst us. And it does take waking up and saying, I'm going to take responsibility for this, and understanding that you're not a victim of it. It was put on you, but you get to choose whether you're going to carry it forward and whether that works. Now, someone who had what you had as a child might grow into an adult that plays it very, very safe and probably tries to control every outcome all the time until something comes along and wakes you up that says your body can't hold that anymore. Your body's carrying your trauma and ancestral trauma. It's gone back for generations. It's been passed. The torch was passed, and you're here to stop it. And we're having a lot of that right now, where a lot of people are saying, I'm here to break that pattern. I'm here to say no more. I don't want future generations to carry that torch of shame or pain any further. And when you see that perspective, that what I'm doing right now is teaching him to be afraid. What I'm doing right now is teaching him that bad things are going to happen. I'm teaching him that he has to have a lot of control.
Like, I'm literally passing it on and teaching him to expect that these bad things are going to happen.
Yes, that's you shaping and teaching him out of love, because you don't want anything bad to happen. And you were given it out of love, because nobody wanted something bad to happen to you, even though it was right in the middle of it happening. And it's up to us to say, no, I want to create future generations that are not carrying all this pain and shame. And that means I have to do the work to heal that in me so that I don't pass it to them. And a lot of times that pendulum swings far from one side and then the other. So we see one generation being that his generation, your son, might rebel and be so carefree and reckless in a way of, I'm not going to carry it, but he's still carrying it because it's a reaction to it. Right. And the only true way to heal that is to come to center, come into alignment with the very thing that you want to experience, which is peace and love and harmony. Those are states of being that our soul wants to live in.
I feel like I literally got to a point where, and excuse my language, I was sick of my own shit. I was sick of my perspectives that were not working for me.
Right. Right.
People's rock bottoms are different. I feel like I've had rock bottoms at different layers, and, health issues or, just emotional issues. Like you said, my body cannot do this anymore. I literally cannot function like this anymore.
Yeah.
How do I change my perspective?
You just start by catching it. You have to be present. You have to be that observer that says, are you coming from fear or are you coming from love? Are you, repeating an old pattern? Are you creating a new pattern? If you're repeating an old pattern, how's it working for you? Do you want to continue to do this? If not, break the pattern. Here's the thing about breaking patterns too, is that there is no wrong action. When you break a pattern, it's just break it. just do anything other than what you normally would do. And it can still be like a different bad pattern, but you broke that one. And so it's eventually you're breaking it in a positive way. It's like, I'm going to not do that right now. And sometimes those impulses are so strong that it is like you kind of need to chain yourself to a door, not to follow those impulses. I gotta really lock myself up right now because I don't trust that I can create that new pathway. Bob shared something with me that he was learning about pathways of the brain, and the way that we rewire this is wiring. Your synapses, your beliefs are repetitive thoughts become a belief, and the belief gets thicker over time. And those are the neural pathways of the brain. Like that's how they fire. So even though you can tell yourself you're not going to do something, you will find yourself doing it in the heat of the moment every time. But you have to, I call them bridges in the brain. Like you have to blow up one bridge and build a new one. When we break a pattern, we're saying we're not going to cross that bridge. We're building a new one.
What does Dr. Joe Dispenza say? He says something like 99% of what you do in a day is a pattern.
It is. It is. It's all automatic actions from your belief systems, most of which you don't even know you have because they're subconscious.
So if
programs.
We're all doing that and that's all going on at the same time, of everybody functioning off patterns, is what's happening really true?
Good question.
You know what I'm saying? Like we all have these perspectives, but it's all based on patterns and not reality in a sense. So where's the truth in all of that?
Well, and it is deep, and the patterns actually do create your reality, right? Those patterns create the reality. And so if your reality sucks and you don't like it, create some new belief systems about it. But that defies everything. Some people have built their whole life around those patterns, and breaking them can be terrifying, right? But what Bob was saying is that when someone has a different experience than the one that they're used to, let's say they take a risk on their own behalf and they do something uncomfortable and it turns out well, it goes really well, that it takes if they can be in that good experience for 5 hours, if you can be connected to your son's trip to the ice cream store after school and coming home and feeling so wonderful about that newfound independence, and he can bask in that feeling and you can indulge that feeling for him for 5 hours, both you and he will have a new neural pathway in the brain that says something good could happen. This could be a good thing. And maybe the next time it'll be a good thing. But you have to keep reinforcing the new belief system. And this stuff gets deep. It does. It goes very, very deep. But for today, what we want to leave you all thinking about is, where do you get attached to being right? Who and what do you do that with most often? Where do you find yourself needing to be right? And what is it that you're being right about? Like there are patterns there that you'll start to discover. Who are you most likely to jump to a conclusion about? If you have a preconceived notion of who a person is or how they're going to behave or what they think of you, are you jumping to conclusions about what's going to happen in your next interaction? Who is that person and what are they representing in your belief system? And they will give you that question. Journaling that one will be really powerful. 3, what is your coping stance when someone tries to tell you another point of view that conflicts with what seems to be your reality? How do you dig your heels in? What is your coping stance? Is it a fight? Is it righteousness? Is it dismissal? Is it judgment? What is it how do you communicate your point of view as the one and only point of view, and it is right? 4, how hard is it for you to offer an apology when you realize that from their perspective, they were right, and from yours, so were you? Like, are you able to say, I'm sorry I jumped to that conclusion. I'm sorry I was operating only from my point of view and didn't take the time to hear yours? How hard is it? Because sometimes we get our ego stuck and we don't like to admit if we made a mistake, which is the fifth one. Is it hard to admit when you are wrong? And you really want to explore that one because we're all going to get it wrong sometimes. We're all going to have those. And for me, in that moment of truth with my son and those brownies, it was hard. It was really hard to admit that I made a mistake. And I can give you a half a dozen examples that followed that one where I thought I was the parent. I was the parent and I thought I knew what was best. And I didn't take the time to listen and overpowered my own children's voice from a place of being right. And it's very damaging when you do that. So yeah. Any closing thoughts, Kristen?
I think we could talk for hours on this topic and I could get us into another rabbit hole. So I'll let you close out.
All right. Well, we hope you'll take those questions that we just covered and we hope that you'll look at maybe the next time you find yourself in your physical body, you'll start to feel what those sensations are when you get triggered into a place of I'm right and you're wrong. But notice that. And I like to go in hindsight. What was the last time I experienced that? What was going on? And then go back and revisit it and re-engage with that person and find out, was there something I missed? Because we can learn in hindsight and from a place of openness to discover something easier than in the heat of the moment sometimes. And as you start to see that there are these other perspectives, and that what you see isn't the only perspective, it becomes really, to me, it was very empowering and invigorating to revisit some of these and go, wow, look at what was I attached to? And you can really go down a deep rabbit hole to learn about yourself and to learn about how you take your stance in a defensive argument when it's time to try to be right. So if this topic spoke to you today and you would like to hear more, or we are going to be offering a centering prayer for self-acceptance in the blessing room today and talk a little bit more about this affliction that we have about being right about things. So we're going to continue our discussion over in the blessing room on Patreon, and you are welcome to join us there if you'd like to become a member to receive that. And if not, we hope you use today's podcast topic to further explore areas where maybe you jumped the gun and took a position of righteousness that didn't end up well, and that you can go back and start to address it with love. Take care. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you found a spark of wisdom to carry with you, and maybe even a deeper invitation to heal and grow and transform through your own beautiful story. Or maybe this episode made you think of someone who could use encouragement. And if so, I hope you will share it with them. If you'd like to learn more about working with me or attending one of my healing retreats, coaching programs, and other offerings, you can visit my website at jennyaiello.com or email me directly at jenny@jaiello.com. You'll find all the links in the show notes. If today's episode touched you, it would mean the world if you would leave a review or share it with someone who might need it, or just reach out and let me know how it landed for you. I'd love to hear from you. I'm building something special here. Real stories, real life, real connection. One episode, one heart, and one story at a time. As always, with love. Oh, and this is the legal message, but mostly a message from my heart. And I just need to share this with you right now. Please know this podcast is offered solely for educational and entertainment purposes. If you find yourself triggered due to anything that was shared in this podcast, please seek professional help. This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for mental health services. While I am a professional life coach, I am not a psychotherapist, nor am I a mental health clinician. So if you are struggling emotionally, please seek help because you matter, You are important. And most of all, you are worthy of doing this work, the work that leads you to a better and healthier place. Okay? All right. Thank you. And please always make enough time to take care of yourself and do so with love.